Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on key data for qualitative and mixed data. As the name would suggest, we're going to look at key data collections that are held here at the UK Data Service, and specifically those data that are qualitative or mixed methods. This is an introductory webinar, so we assume you have little prior knowledge of the UK Data Service and all the delights that are held within for qualitative and mixed methods researchers. My name is Maureen Haker. I've been working with qualitative data at the UK Data Service for about 6 years now, and I'm also a lecturer in research methods at the University of Suffolk. So let's go ahead and get underway. Here's the overview of what we're going to cover today. I want to say just a little bit about the broader picture of the UK Data Service so you know where the qualitative and mixed data fit within the bigger picture. I'll give you some examples and details of some of our best qualitative and mixed data collections, and try to show you how they've been used in some quite creative ways. I'll also cover how to find and access data, particularly the qualitative and mixed, and close with some tips and resources and places to go for further help. Do be aware we've got lots of webinars and lots of materials that go into much further details on things like finding and accessing data. This is just a quick overview. We found that people want some information on that topic, even when the primary topic is to cover the data itself. But if you need more details, please check some of our other webinars. What is the UK Data Service? We're a comprehensive resource funded by the ESRC. Our main job is to be a single point of access to a wide range of social science data. Our main purpose then is the collection, ingest, and processing of data and further dissemination of that data for people to use. In addition to that data infrastructure core, we also have a service layer which provides extensive support, training, and guidance. Who is it for? Well, we like to think it's really for anyone who has an interest in data. Traditionally, our main audience and the people who probably both deposit and use our data the most tend to be academic researchers and students. A lot of other groups are well represented as well, including government analysts, charities, foundations, businesses, research centers, and think tanks all give us and use our data. Given the importance of data, how it's used, how it's disseminated, we're trying to reach out and support a wide range of communities. This past about a year and a half or so, we released a new front page for our website, which you may have already seen. This is sort of just the top half of the page to give you a flavor of what we do. The link to the main page is below, and I'll show you a bit more on this page and where to go to find things specific to qualitative and mixed data a little bit later. What kind of data do we hold? Well, this session is specifically about qualitative and mixed, but just so you know, if you are interested, the majority of our data, at least judging by the number of collections, is quantitative data. We hold over 6,000 collections, of which over 5,000 are quantitative collections. And we hold a wide variety of that data. Survey data, both cross-sectional and longitudinal, aggregate statistics, domestic, international macro data, and the census data, which is aggregate for 71 to 2011, and microdata for the select years listed there. But today, again, I'm just focusing on the qualitative and mixed data. Where does it come from? Well, again, that varies depending on the data type, and some of these sources you see here, including agencies and statistical time series, those are clearly from sources for quantitative data. Most of our qualitative and mixed data come through individual academics, which are usually funded by research grants. So this is often the ESRC, but not exclusively. We certainly take in data from other funders, such as the Wellcome Trust, the Leverhulme, and others, and also have some independently funded work. And also, of course, for some of the qualitative, originally paper-based materials, we hold public records and historical sources, including things like the census. So where you want to have a way of finding key qualitative data through our website, there's a couple different paths to it. And just on the right side of the screen here, you can see there's just a snippet of what our homepage looks like. And you can see there's a section which outlines different types of data. And one of those main areas is qualitative and mixed. And if you click that link, you'll be taken to this page. So there's the qualitative and mixed, and here's the page you get taken to, which is all of our key data for qualitative and mixed data. If you come to the website from a different way and don't arrive at the home page, you can always get to this page from the menu at the top. And this is the same menu for all of the pages. So you just have to click Get Data, and then click Key Data in the left-hand menu, and then select Qualitative and Mixed Methods box right in the middle there. And the key data listed on this page is just a collection of about 10 or so data sets of things that we know are very well used, and we know they are very high quality, easily accessible, and more generally just a really good introduction to the range of the kind of data we hold at the archive. So let me tell you a little bit about some of the other collections which might not be listed under that page. And these collections are fairly new deposits, or at least most of them are, and they demonstrate the kind of things that we have coming in. The first study demonstrates the quality and capacity in inclusive research with people with learning disabilities. It's a focus group-based research. Some of the focus groups are with people who have learning disabilities, and some of the focus groups are with researchers who they themselves have learning disabilities and are doing research on learning disabilities. So it's very much in the spirit of active research, of participatory research, and of course, a really good example of focus group research. Just to note here as well that data reuse is a great way to access certain populations which would normally be difficult to access, whether it's because they're physically difficult to access, such as prisoners, or in the case of disability, sometimes require further resources to appropriately safeguard and address the needs of the group. And that, of course, may have funding or ethical challenges. The second item here is Intergenerational Dynamics by Jennifer Mason, and it looks at whether people above the age of 50 consider themselves a generation and whether or not they identify as a generation in contrast to other age groups, primarily younger, or do they identify themselves differently? She's done a great deal of work on these kinds of aging and generational dynamics, and this is interview-based data, and again, very high quality. The next one is Chronic Illness in Online Networking, Expectations, Assumptions, and Everyday Realities. This research is on diabetes and the use of Facebook. So just to point out with this particular one, we don't have a lot of data of what we're calling new and novel forms of data, like big data, social media, and those kinds of things. But we are getting some. And this is an example of someone who's been using Facebook contacts in order to study how people with diabetes form support groups and how they get information. So it's quite creative and a different kind of data from the usual interview-based research. The fourth one down is Coalitional Presidentialism in Comparative Perspective, Minority Executives in Multi-Party Systems. It's quite a mouthful, and it's not as accessible as the others, but I did want to make the point with this one that you don't just get individual-based data in qualitative and mixed. So this study looks at presidential coalitions across a number of countries, across Europe, Africa, and Asia. It makes the point, again, that even with qualitative research, you can still do macro-scale kind of comparative work. And this kind of study is a good example of that. Finally, we have Family Life and Work Experience before 1918, and this is one of the founding collections for the qualitative part of the archive. So this one's not new, but I would be amiss if I didn't mention it. It's comprised of over 400 oral history interviews and is considered to be the first oral history project of Britain. It's been very well used, so I don't really need to promote it, but I wanted to signpost to it as it's the typical kind of collection that many people probably think of when they think of qualitative data. Perhaps not this large, but these are people who were born in the Edwardian era, and some of these interviews are massive. They're really, really long, and they cover all aspects of these people's lives, so it's an incredibly rich collection. So what I'm going to do now is give you a quick whirlwind tour of the three collections that we hold here and tell you a bit about what they've done and how they've been used. So the first of these is The Last Refuge. I've put in the study number, the SN, which might seem a bit esoteric to you, but if you, especially if you're new to the UK Data Service. But all of our collections have a study number associated with it. And you can find our collections through lots of tools, but if you happen to run across a study number, it's a really quick way to find that specific collection, so it's useful to know. The Last Refuge was conducted by Peter Townsend, and it's a major investigation into long-stay institutional care for old people in Britain in the late 1950s. And again, it's a bit like family life and work experience before 1918. This study was really exceptional for its breadth and range given the time that it was done. This collection has in-depth interviews with 67 local authority chief welfare officers and with serving staff and residents of 173 institutions. It's also an important collection because of the diversity of the content. So it wasn't just interviews. There's also photographs, field notes, diaries. I think another feature that's quite important about this collection is that the diaries are recorded by both members of staff and residents of the institutions. I think that's probably one of the few examples where there are actual examples of residents in long-stay institutions. And at the bottom of the page here, there's a link there so that you can access the collection. So again, you can see the richness of some of the images that are available with this data collection, which really help to visualize more of the context of that collection. And the reason that this collection is so influential is twofold. One was that there was a pioneering use of qualitative data in the area of old age, retirement, isolation services, and so forth. Some of the quantitative work that had been done, but really the use of qualitative for this kind of direct policy relevance was new with Townsend's work. And the second reason was that this study had major policy implications because Townsend's results challenged whether long-stay institutions were really the best place for the elderly. And I think part of the conclusion of the book is that for many elderly, in some circumstances, they're not the right form of institution. But it also had several practical implications in that he recognized that people needed not just criticism, but also suggestions. And he came up with some recommendations on improvements that institutions could adopt. The next study I'll tell you a little bit more about is called the School Leavers Study. And in this case, the original data were collected in 1978 by a researcher named Ray Paul. And this work was done with students on the Isle of Sheppey. Sheppey is an island off the east part of the UK. Ray Paul had spent a long time studying many aspects of living and working on the Isle of Sheppey, which included employment, education, religion, and family. Just a huge range of issues. Somewhere in that process, he got interested in schools and the educational experience. So what he found out was a situation where teachers at one comprehensive school were asked to set a particular kind of essay to pupils just before they were due to leave school. So roughly about 16 years old. And I think this is actually a difficult kind of essay. They were asked to imagine that they were nearing the end of their life and that something made them think back to the time that they left school. They then had to write an imaginary account of how their life played out after leaving school at 16, and then the 30 or 40 years after. Despite being a difficult exercise to engage in, these students did an impressive job providing details which allowed a quick glimpse into their aspirations, expectations, and the realities of their lives to come. So what we got as a result of this exercise is 141 of these essays, 89 boys and 52 girls. And what you see briefly, and there is much more to be done with these essays, but I'm just highlighting a few key points, is some themes of realism, possibly pessimism. Young people talked about mundane but stable and grounded jobs. They imagined very gradual career progression if they progressed at all. And there were also stories of stagnation, unemployment, and somewhat morbidly, some predicted their own early death, either for themselves or their loved ones. And these quotes give you a flavor of the type of tone. Again, not all of the essays, but strong themes throughout the data set. So as I said, it's very realistic, very down-to-earth kind of commentary. So for example, the boy who said, "It was hard finding a job, I failed a few chances, but eventually got what I wanted locally." Or another who said, "I was on the dole for 6 months after leaving school until I got a job in a garage." Or the girl on the bottom who said, "I longed for something exciting and challenging, but yet again, I had to settle for second best. I began working in a large clothes factory." What's interesting is contemporary researchers, Graham Crowe and Don Lyon, went in about 2010 and tried another similar exercise. It's not a strict replication, since Paul more or less sort of stumbled upon to the assignment that the teacher set, so there was not as much control over how the essay was put to students, but it's still a reuseful restudy. So now there's a new collection of data which offers a comparative to the present day. Like the first collection, it asks school leavers on Sheppey to imagine their lives, and we get a really different story. So for Sheppey's young people in about 2010, we hear really different themes. So again, a similar sort of sample size of 110 essays, a bit more evenly split between boys and girls. And generally, the themes that arose from the present day Sheppey students included stories about well-paid, instantaneous jobs, including signing a contract for football, for football or singing. There was a lot of choice, but also a lot of uncertainty. We also clearly see an influence of celebrity culture. So again, you get a feel for this restudy by looking at some of the quotes, and you see how young people in 2010 had a very different view of the world from the young people in the late 1970s. So one boy wrote that he had an amazing band and toured the world 3 times and sold 4 million records. Another thought that he would like to own a 3-bedroom luxury villa, a helicopter, and a Bentley. And finally, the girl at the bottom who wanted to be anything from a dancer to a hairdresser to a horse rider, and if a dancer, her dream would be to dance for Beyonce or someone really famous. So quite a shift in possibilities for young people today. In terms of the impact of this particular study, it's quite different from the last refuge. As part of the restudy, Graham Crowe and Don Lyon engaged with the community on the Isle of Sheppey and actively sought to involve them in the process of data creation and analysis. As part of this initiative, they created the Living and Working on the Isle of Sheppey website, where they have an archive so that community members can see the original study as well as see what's been added as part of the restudy. It's given their community a bit of a written and oral history while also engaging them in exploring their community from different perspectives. They also have videos, art galleries, and audio, so people can really experience the lived memory of their community. So finally, for the third study I'll look at, this one is actually a very well-known mixed method study called the National Child Development Survey. And it follows the lives of over 17,000 people that were born in the same week of 1958. At this point, these people are surveyed every several years. So far, participants have been surveyed 9 times since the initial contact in 1958, and the next wave is coming up this year as the participants turn 60. And the first wave was done starting when participants were just 7 years old. By this point, the information collected is absolutely comprehensive. It includes information about physical development and education, economic circumstances of their parents and family, employment, their own health and well-being, and social participation. And it's absolutely sweeping in terms of what's included. So simply from a standpoint of quantitative data, it's very good. But what makes it even better is that there was a qualitative addition to this fantastic collection that allows for very rich mixed methods to be done. So in 1969, when children were aged 11, an interesting essay, and very similar to the school leavers, but a little bit different, was done with the children. And they were asked to imagine that they were 25. So in some sense, a somewhat more realistic experience in that they only had to project 15 years ahead. Still difficult, perhaps, though, at age 11, but they got over 500 essays in the end. Of course, what's very valuable about this collection is twofold. One is that the sample size is large, particularly for a qualitative collection. The second is that you have the quantitative data to compare what actually happened to them at age 25. So not only can you look at what they thought could happen, but then you could look at their lives at 25 and now also 45 and 55 and see how things unfolded. And a number of articles have been written using this data collection. Jane Elliott, whose publication looked at gender, is right there, is one of the best known people who've used this data set. Okay, so by now hopefully I've persuaded you that using qualitative and mixed data is a good idea and you want to get your hands on some of it. So let's just now walk through how you can do that. And you can do that using our catalog, which is called Discover, and it's aptly named. It's both what you do and the name of the catalog. And this slide will go through how you would conduct a search looking for something which required a filter on a couple different criteria. When you click on the Get Data tab at the top, it brings you directly to Discover, which you can see the blue dot just next to the word Discover there, and that's how you know that you are in our catalog. And first we can filter by type, indicating that we want data collections. We have lots of different resources, which include case studies, reuse projects, and reports in series. But what we want to look at now is data. So if you click on the box and hit Refine, and it's important to hit Refine because it doesn't happen automatically. And if you're finding search results that are not coming out what you think they should be, make sure again that you're hitting Refine. And then down here, the data type, you can click on qualitative or mixed methods. I've just picked a general search term of food, and as you can see, there's at least 58 collections which somehow have food written either as a keyword somewhere in the catalog record. This could be the abstract, title, keywords, or subjects, anywhere food might show up on the catalog record. So you can see a couple examples here: managing food chain risks, changes around food experience, impact of reduced contact with food on the social engagement and well-being of older women. So that's how you could search. There's other types of filters which are not shown here, but if you want to be more specific about the type of data that's returned, and there's a whole separate webinar and guides that will be available for further information on how to find data. We also have a search using that specifically looks for qualitative material specifically, which is QualiBank. And this is an online resource which allows you to search, browse, and cite qualitative materials. You can get to it by clicking QualiBank, which is just 2 lines below Discover. And QualiBank allows you to basically to look directly at the data itself. So if you want to start a search using QualiBank, it works in a similar sort of way as Discover. So as here, I tried typing in typhoid, and you can see again, like Discover, you get about 20 results with this. What's different about how QualiBank searches, though, is that it actually searches through this data. So if you're looking for a qualitative data that specifically has a keyword or concept in it, you can use QualiBank to search through the data itself rather than just the catalog record. So right now, QualiBank has about 20 collections or so uploaded into its database, but this is quickly expanding. You can also browse through data. So if you know what collection you want to look through, or if you had a certain criteria for participants' age, gender, socioeconomic status, or region, you can refine those characteristics using the left-hand menu. And like Discover, you'll need to hit Refine after ticking any browsing facets. From this search on typhoid, I then chose to look at the interview with Mrs. Omison, and you can see the interview transcript laid out on the web page, and your search term will be highlighted within that transcript. What's nice about QualiBank is that it links to external resources, which you can see circled at the top there. And if you click on that link, it will take you to the bottom of the page after the transcript finishes, and you can see that there's a variety of resources related to this particular interview, which include an audio extract, a book abstract on the Edwardians, images related to the collection, and metadata on the participant. It's a really useful tool to help you contextualize the qualitative data. And finally, there's the capacity to cite. So if you simply click Create Citation in the left-hand menu, and then highlight with your cursor a portion of the text that you want to cite, then click the Retrieve Citation button, which will appear where the Create Citation button was, and you'll get a small pop-up like this one. And that will automatically appear with the citation, so you can simply copy and paste this. If someone looking at this citation were to click on the persistent identifier or the URL at the end of this citation, it would bring them specifically to the highlighted section of the transcript that you specifically wanted to cite. This feature is particularly useful if you want to cite an excerpt of qualitative data in a publication. This allows for another layer of transparency in your research so others can see the quotation in the full context of the interview or data set. QualiBank is a fairly new feature of the UK data service, so it's something that will still expand, and we're still working on the support materials to help you use it effectively. But if you have any queries about it, feel free to get in touch. And now I'll turn to the final section of this presentation and talk just a little bit about access and some of the other tools and resources to help you get started. Data are freely available to anyone who registers with us. Now we do have material held under different licenses. So for example, we hold open data, which is freely accessible to anyone. We hold safeguarded data, which requires you to register. And we hold data under more restricted conditions. Any conditions for a data set will be listed on the catalog record, but basically if you're using the data for a non-commercial purpose, the data are free to use once you register with us. Data are available in multiple formats. So for qualitative data, that's text, and you'll most likely be getting some sort of word processed document or PDF. We hold very few outputs of qualitative software packages. We hold some images, audio, and some video as well. They're not huge collections in the audio and video, but increasingly we do take them. So if you're at a UK university, your own username and password will get you in. If you're not, you'll need to make an application, and assuming that you meet the criteria and agree to our terms and conditions, which I'll say a little bit more on the next slide, you'll then be issued a UK data service specific username and password, which will get you access to the data. It would probably take me longer to read through this slide than to explain registration than actually doing that registration. So the only thing I'm going to point out is that when you go through registration, you accept terms and conditions on our end user license. And this is a legal document, and it's about as exciting as any legal document, but I want to stress just 2 points from it. If you sign up to use data from the UK Data Service, you are not to disclose the identity of participants, even if you should discover who they are. In most cases, you'll be unable to uncover those identities anyways because the data has been anonymized. But even if you should, you're not permitted to disclose it. The second condition is that you can't share the data onward, and that means with anybody. So that could include your research team, your students, anybody. We have lots of resources available for students and researchers, and they can always register separately and download the data set themselves. So remember, do not disclose identities or share the data. So those are the 2 things to remember about that end user license. Downloading data, again, there's a great short video which walks you through the process. You pick up your data. You have to write a short description on what you plan to do with the data. It's sort of like online shopping, except with data. The video tutorials are really useful if you've not downloaded it before and you'd like to see how it's done. So useful tips, particularly for new users. at the very bottom of our opening page, down near the Contact Us in Legal Bits, we have a link of advice for new users. It will take you to the guides that have been set up specifically for those who are coming to the service for the first time. We've got all sorts of resources on how to find data with Discover, how to register, how to access the data, what kinds of data we hold. And there's more webinars on census data, microdata, longitudinal data, and you can get all of those online. You can also find out how to get in touch with us and send us a help desk request. And we've got a nice growing collection of video tutorials and how-to guides, again off the main menu at the top under Use Data, and then select Video Tutorials in the left-hand menu. There's also a quick link to the video tutorials off of the main home page. And there's more webinars coming up, which are listed here. I've also listed a few of the upcoming workshops, but there is lots more coming up before the end of the year, so just check out our events page for further information. Our events page also has the previous webinars available under past events. So if you're looking for anything on finding data or getting started with secondary data, please look at those events, the events part of our website. Past events hold the PowerPoints and other materials, and you can also register for any of those upcoming events as well. And just a few more resources. I've gone through the support and how-to guides, as well as events like workshops. We also have advice for data management for those who are in early stages of their research or coordinating large programs which involve multi-university collaborations. We're happy to talk to you about your data management requirements, whether you are just a single individual or part of a larger consortium. We also are very eager to hear about what you're doing with our data. So if you've used it in a previous publication or in teaching, please get in touch and we can help you publicize that. We can also get you featured in one of our case studies. Our case studies look at people's experiences of reusing data, whether it was for research, teaching, or some other use. And we'd love to hear about your story of reuse. If you have any further questions, please see our help pages and the FAQs. Finally, the usual ways to stay in touch, our contact page if you sign up for our JISC mail list, or you can follow us on Twitter or Facebook.